Hey there everybody, it's Nathan Cool with nathancoolphoto.com, and in this episode I want to talk about the difference between shooting real estate photography and architecture photography and what that means for opportunities that you can expand on your business, knowing what to expect in the way of pricing, what to expect in the way of work, what to expect when you're on site, some of the post-processing stuff. And you may have heard some overarching differences where real estate agents, they don't really pay, architectural photography, that's where the money is, but you might find that you might like one better than the other. So I want to talk about the differences between the two from a lot of different aspects. Now, just to clarify something right up front, when I'm talking about real estate photography, that's what I'm talking about real estate listings, where someone's trying to sell a house and so they're going to put it on the MLS, some type of listing service to where it will be seen by people, they come, they visit, they buy the house. It's a one-time thing. It tends to be a very temporary, short-lived life cycle. Now, some real estate agents may use some of those images with your permission on their website or other marketing material, but for the most part, that's real temporary. Architectural photography really encompasses a larger area. A lot of different people. First thing that comes to mind when people often hear architectural photography, they think, oh, you're just shooting buildings, but it's more than that. So there's builders, new builders that come onto the market. They need to have some of their work advertised, some of the new construction that they've done. You might have stagers. You might have also designers. Like remodel companies are real big on this. As remodel companies, they go in, they might redo a kitchen, a bathroom, a whole house. Then they'll want to have some of that recorded for their website, for their marketing material. So there's a whole lot that fits under architectural. Some people say there's a difference between real estate and designers, and there's a difference between real estate and builders. But really, I like to just encompass it all into architecture photography. Just put it under that one umbrella, make this a lot simpler. So anyways, let's go on to the first thing to see the difference with this, and it's talking about price. One of the biggest differences here, and I touch on this in my book, Business Techniques on Real Estate Photography, and by the way, I have a link to that and other books down in the description for this video, is that when it comes to real estate photography, you tend to put a tiered price list together. It's maybe by the square footage of a house that you're going to shoot. Maybe it's by the number of photos. Either way, you have a preset price list. You publish that price list somehow, whether it's public on your website or whether you send it to clients. But before you go out, there's already an expectation that's been set by how much they're going to pay you. That's how they decided to choose you. If they're just after some cheap work, then of course they're just price shopping. But for the most part though, either way, there's just a set price. Now with that, as I also describe in the Business Techniques book, is that there's a time limit that you should specify. For instance, if you're doing, let's say, up to 2,000 square feet and you're charging maybe $200 or something like that, you would put down that that's going to be a maximum of 1 hour, or maybe an hour and a half, or whatever you feel comfortable with. That way, if you're stuck there longer, you get in the pay per hour type of gig, and that is what architecture photography is about. So when you're doing architectural photography, it is by the hour. Now, once again, architecture including stagers, designers, remodel companies, builders, all that type of stuff where it's not real estate agents. And the reason why it's charged by the hour is that there will be a lot more work on site. For instance, when you first show up on site, you could be doing a walkthrough with them. You could also then be taking each shot with their supervision because they're looking for specific marketing material for their ads. So I'm going to get into more of that too as I step through this video. But basically, the core of this is that you charge by the hour when you do architectural work, and then you have fixed price for real estate. Now, what do you charge by the hour? That is usually your cost basis of doing your real estate photography shoots, your standard MLS listing type of shoots. And once again, that's covered in the Biz Tech book also. But let's say that you were shooting a standard home and it took you an hour and you charged $200 for something like that. Now, if that were the cost for your per hour, then that's what you would be charging architecture also based off that real estate per hour cost. If you're charging $100 for a shoot like that, then it takes you an hour hour, then architecture it's going to be probably $100 as well. But this is where a big difference comes in, and I'll touch on also, is that there's more work after you leave that you get to also charge for. So anyways, that's the biggest difference. It's by the hour when you're doing architecture, and then it's just a fixed price when you're doing standard real estate stuff, but make sure you have a time limit specified on your price list for doing real estate. Let's talk about the next difference. So there is a big difference when it comes to what you're going to do on site for architecture and what you're going to edit for architecture also compared to real estate. Real estate's simple. You get out there, you maybe do some of that flambient like I show throughout my videos and books, and you put that together and boom, there's your picture. You get out there, it's done. When you're on site, it's a little bit different, and that also for the editing. For instance, when you're on site doing all this work, you might be doing all kinds of stuff to blocking light. For instance, here's a shower, and here's the finished shot of it. Looks all nice, but let's take a look at what it took. You can see here I am blocking light, blocking light. I'm doing all this so that at the end of the day, when they have this picture, that's what they're after. They're after the marketing material for that. So they want to spend that extra time. So yes, that shot took me quite a while to do, and I would never do that for a real estate listing. I've got a time limit that I'm there for, and that's what they're going to pay me for. But architecture is different, and you have to work around that. I've been on a site doing architectural work where the sun will be beaming through and hitting like a kitchen island. It's like, oh, and it just keeps changing every hour or every half hour too around different parts of the kitchen, and you have to block that out. You have to gobo or whatever you're going to do, flag it so that you don't have that sun. And if you're doing flambient, you have to do that for all of your ambient exposures like I showed in that example of the shower, and you have to do it also for your flashed shots also. So there's a lot of work that goes into that. Hence, that's why you charge by the hour. When you're done though, there's still maybe more editing that they'll ask you to do, and this is paid by the hour. Now, editing is a different cost in architectural photography, and it's usually about 50% of your on-site time because you're just going to sit at home and do this. There's no traveling to, traveling from, there's no wear and tear on your equipment, whatever, and also the major editing's done. So for instance, here's a shot and it looks all fine. This was for an architectural shoot, but if you look really close on the before shot, you can see that there are reflections that are on that backsplash wall there with the granite. So the designer did not want those little reflections in there and felt that it was distracting. So that's one of those things where after they review the images, then they can get back with me with a list of this is what they'd like. Now, usually what I'll do is I'll give them a quote based off of these things. Say, you know, all this stuff that you're talking about is probably about 2 or 3 hours worth of work. If they have some major stuff, I'll break that down. Say, yeah, most of that was maybe 2 hours worth of work, but what you're asking for here could be an extra 3 hours. And then it's up to them to decide if they want to pay you to have that extra editing done. So anyways, there's a lot more time on site usually doing architectural photography to make sure that you get the images and the footage correct without all these extra artifacts so you can make really good marketing material out of it. And then also there usually is a workflow kind of iterative process where there's a review and then they come back and ask for more edits. Now, with that, you might be used to charging, for instance, up front. You don't get your photos until you pay. When it comes to architecture photography, there's usually a company that you're working with and they'll have a higher reputation. If you feel comfortable with a new client, you can always ask for a 50% deposit up front. It might be non-refundable if they cancel. However you want to use that to your advantage, or you can say that, you know, for instance, for these edits, I want to be paid for what I've done before I do the edits, but then you're going to start looking like, you know, a real penny pincher. So what I would suggest and what I do is that working with a reputable company that I've already worked with, I just bill them all at the same time at the end. If it's a new company, then there's an estimate given up front, and then there's a 50% deposit that's required beforehand. So anyways, let's move on to the next difference. Expectations are probably the next biggest thing to cover when it comes to the difference between real estate and architecture. In that real estate, it's real easy. Expectations are kind of set by what this real estate agent already saw in your portfolio. That's just your standard real estate stuff, and they expect that. Now, they are looking for good quality work, sure, but when it comes to then architecture, it varies widely. I do have some real estate agents that have some variance in expectations, but the tolerance limit there is very, very small. It's usually, yes, they see that I do the flambient, they know the colors are accurate, it's a high quality photo, they love it, great. But when it comes to these architecture type gigs, whether it's builders, stagers, designers, all this, they all have different expectations. I've shot for designers that just wanted standard real estate photos. They just wanted capture it all. I just want to see the whole space here. It's so big. Look what all I did with it. Don't even care about the details of it. And then I'll have some designers that, yes, they almost always want one big shot of whatever it is that they did, but then to start breaking it down into various details. That's why it's so important that before you start shooting for an architectural job, and even before you arrive, is to talk a little bit with them about what it is they're looking for. It'll allow you to schedule enough time to do it and also not waste your time while you're shooting. Along with that is usually, if you're up with a designer stager and they're walking through stuff, you might suggest that you do first a review of some shots with them. So what I'll often do is just take some ambient shots, take them off my SD card in the camera, pop them on a laptop so everybody there can see them, instead of shooting tethered, which, yeah, you can do, and then everybody's around you with your camera and it can be kind of a hassle, but you can do that. I just find it easier. It's like, hey, we go off to another room, we take a look at this, and it tells them, is this the composition that you want? Are the staging items that you want, are they in the proper place? So that gives them an idea before you start shooting. But those are some of the biggest expectations, yet I've had then builders with brand new multi-million-dollar projects, tens of millions in fact, that just really don't care as much, and you'd think there would almost be no difference. Here was a big project that I did recently, and it was for a brand new condo complex. Actually, it was an apartment complex, and you can see the twilight shots there just like I would do any other twilight. The pool shots are just like I would do any other shots, and by the way, those were just done from the balconies. And when I went to do the inside of the place, there was, yeah, some of their meeting rooms that they had, the gym that they had. Those were basically the same as I would do for any other real estate photo shoot, except that, yes, I did take a little bit more time. I'm charging by the hour, and they expect good high quality for their advertisement. When I went to shoot each one of those apartment models, they had 3 or 4 different ones that were staged of different sizes and layouts. It was just like doing a standard real estate photo shoot. In fact, the feedback that I got from one of the developers on this project that hired me to do this was, well, we like your portfolio, so whatever it is you feel you need to do, just go for it. So there was a multi-gig thing where I went out, shot multiple times, and of course then for the twilight also, and charging by the hour. So it's good to know those expectations up front and then plan for them accordingly, and then you'll also know if you need to do any review work, like in that case for that big apartment complex, there was no review. They just kind of let me do what I wanted to do. So you have to know your client. Each one will be a little bit different, but getting paid by the hour, feel free to kill them with kindness and do as much as they want you to do in preparation for the shoot. Okay, let's talk about the next difference. Composition will vary usually between real estate and architecture. Real estate, yeah, they want to see it all. Space sells. Now, I'm not a fan of the super wide angle shots. You know that throughout my videos and books, I like to shoot at about 18 to 20 millimeter full frame so that I don't get this super wide distorted view, and most of my clients hate that because it shows size deception. And so there's a misconception, though, that when it comes to architecture, they want these Instagram-looking little detail vignettes. And while that is important to some degree, I guarantee you every single one of my clients that have hired me to do, whether it's designers, stagers, any type of architecture work, they want at least one shot that shows it all, and then break it down from there. For instance, here was a very large kitchen. And you think, wow, you're showing so much ceiling in this. Well, that's because they also redid the ceiling. They also redid the ceiling cans. They did the chandeliers. In other words, everything from top to bottom literally is what they wanted. But then there's some other details. This was just one here showing, for instance, the wine cob that they had. So there's a difference here on what you might find just in that aspect, but there's even more. For instance, if I was shooting real estate, if I did a detail, it might be of a counter, a sink, something like that. But then when you get into builders or designers, remodel companies, look at this. Here, I'm tilting down. They don't care about the verticals. They want to show that floor, that pan in the shower and all the fancy tile work that they did for it. So that was an important thing. Also, sometimes they might want to see flooring. So for instance, if we take a look at this shot, we can see that we're seeing a lot more floor than usual for that. So it's like I would always shoot above counter height, but here this was a different case. So that was important. Here's one that's even lower. I mean, here what they wanted to show was that underneath of the counter that they added also the same type of cabinetry so that they have a nice flow of that woodwork that they did there. Another thing too is when it comes to things like cabinets, built-ins, I would never take the time to do this type of a shot for a standard real estate shoot. But look at these over here where it's like, yeah, you can see the pullouts, the Lazy Susan, and those shots were done specifically on request. And another little tip on that, by the way, if you want to rewind and take a closer look at those, is that those had a flash placed inside of the cabinet so that I could get that lit up, because inside of cabinets are very dark. Now, once again, this isn't for real estate. This is for architecture. It's for an advertisement. So they want to be able to show the features. They don't have to worry about what I call property affecting items. You might recall that if you have my advanced editing book, is that property affecting items are very important on real estate. You can't hide cracks in ceilings. You can't hide cracks in driveways if you're selling a property, because it's false advertisement. When you're selling your company, you can have a lot of latitude on what you're doing because you're selling concepts and whatnot. So that's a whole different ball game. So that's why on stuff like this, yeah, there's some strange compositions, and yeah, you might do some other things that are special for it. Along with composition is also the difference in going in the portrait mode or going in landscape mode. And most of the time for real estate photography, there's no need to turn your camera vertically. As you know, I've got a video specifically on this, and I'll have a link to that also in the description for this video. So if you want to review that and how I do the vertical shots. But the fact is that real estate, a lot of time when it's on a listing site, those skinny little portrait orientation pictures, they're not really necessarily the favorite of most agents. Yeah, sometimes you can take multiple shots of those and maybe put that into a collage or something. But for the most part, it's just not worth the time. Once again, real estate is a temporary type of media. When it comes to architecture, there's a lot of opportunity for that. For instance, here's a few recent ones that were done vertical, and we can see that there's some stuff here on these bathrooms, so we can see what would be better shot this way than if we tried to do those horizontal, because these show then the entire from top to bottom pictures, and those might be used differently. I can guarantee you, in fact, they'd be used differently than the typical landscape orientation. For instance, a lot of designers, builders, whatnot, they might write an article, they might have it on their website or other print material or digital media, where they'll have that as a sidebar, and then they'll have text off to the side of it. So there's usually a purpose for that as well. There's another opportunity too that's often lost when it comes to those that don't want to do architectural photography, and that's that there's a way to double your money if you target construction companies and new builders. There's before and after. For instance, here's some before shot here. They were putting this together. I was shooting this for a builder, and here's the after shot of it. So they had me come out twice. Here's another one of the before, and we can see the after. So the idea was to come out for two shoots. Now the first one was very simple. They didn't want it to look good, so there was no special lighting. Plus it's a construction site. Also, when you go out and you do those type of gigs, make sure that you are wearing good shoes. Invest in a hard hat if you think you need to, and also I have an orange vest that I'll wear. I'll put a link to that. It's real cheap, and you can find a bunch of them on Amazon or whatnot, but that then gives you more of a professional construction type look about you, and you have to be careful with your gear also. So that's why you don't want to be putting light stands around, stuff like that. But it's an easy job, easy gig to do, doing these befores, and then when they're done, then you take the time, you go out, you do the after. Both gigs are paid by the hour, but anyways, there's an area of opportunity for that if you start targeting builders. And another side note on that I mentioned earlier is that a lot of builders, they aren't as picky as the designers and stagers. They're happy with just shoot it all, see what all I did, and maybe a few details here and there. And of course, that's up to them and consulting with them what they want. But that then gives you kind of a double whammy of what you can do on doing before and doing after, and then getting locked in with these real estate building companies so that you can start doing a lot more of their jobs by being able able to have this wide variety that you can give them. Couple other differences to really consider, and that's that the post-processing, like I mentioned, can have added costs, as they might want to have some things removed, some things changed, some colors improved, whatever it is they want. That's great. You get extra work for doing just add-on editing, and this pays way more than if you were to just outsource editing. They're paying for professional work for you to spend time doing advanced stuff. So it's real common to have a lot of architectural photography clients come back and go, hey, can you remove this outlet? Can you remove the cords from the mini blinds? Can you remove cords that are coming off of lamps? Even more, tons of stuff that they might ask for. So it's good to really up your game on knowing how to do that. And a lot of that stuff's pretty easy in Photoshop. In my advanced editing book, I also show a bunch of techniques for some of this stuff. But having that, remember, it's different from real estate, because in real estate photography, if you get asked to remove an item, yeah, make sure you keep that in writing, because it can be false advertisement. You don't want to have somebody come back at you, the photographer, for giving false advertisement. Leave that up to the agent. Make sure you get that in writing. But when it comes to architectural photography, you might get tons of requests, and yeah, just go ahead and do them. Give them a quote form. And I know there are some photographers that just automatically remove outlets, remove all this stuff. I don't like to do that. It's one of those things where this is really left up to the client to decide if they want to remove those things in an architectural shoot. Also, I don't want to spend the extra time if it's just not needed. It's not the added effort that goes into that standard per hour price that I'm out there. As I showed in that one example where I'm blocking all that sun for the shower, there's a lot of time on site already doing a lot of stuff to make sure you get high accuracy in the footage so you can provide high accuracy images for those architectural clients. So another thing to consider here is that you might also get requests later to do graphic arts type of work. Particularly, it's nothing usually that difficult. Usually it's just cropping and resizing. So a lot of these companies, they don't have their own graphic arts department. Some of them may hire a marketing company that handles their website, and they might be able to do some of that, but don't be surprised if you get requests that come back and say, hey, could you do some cropping for us? Can you do this? Can you do that? Some companies also like to have their branding put on the images. That is done last. After they've approved all the images and they're good to go, then lastly, they might have a request for all this resized logo, stuff like that. And of course, once again, this is all post-process editing that you charge by the hour for. It's usually not a lot of work, but it can add a little bit to it. Anyways, I hope this video was useful for you and that you can use some of this in your photography as well. If you did like this video and you want to see more, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. It won't cost anything, and as soon as one of these videos is posted, you'll be the first to know. Thanks a lot for watching. Until next time, take care, be safe, and get out there and shoot something.